Now to continue the story of the Mitsubishi X-12 Interplay System and trying to get it to work. When we last left this story, we had found out that it didn't work very well. It played 45 records, and that was it. 33s would not play, and I didn't notice at the time, but when it would reach the end of a record, the tone arm wouldn't know what to do, and it would just sit there. So I had to start disassembling, trying to figure out how to pull the system apart and figure out what was going wrong. So you remove a plate in the center of the play deck, and then the tone arm has to be moved over so that it fits through that little opening. And then by removing a few screws on the backside, you can actually kind of wiggle out the turntable mechanism enough to kind of get access to all the pieces and parts. And just by removing the screws and poking around and trying to figure out how it all actually kind of functioned, I noticed the issue was going to be a bunch of lights. Along the top rail, there's a set of 3 lights in a little teeny circuit board that all need to function. And I noticed as I was looking at it and got really close, these 3 guys right here, one of them worked and 2 of them looked in a very bad state. There was a lot of corrosion and a lot of broken wires, and it just looked terrible. I think whatever epoxy they used to secure the light bulbs or protect them actually slowly caused corrosion and ate through the connections, at least on 2 of them. When you see the circuit board come off here, it leaves 2 of the lights behind. I think I have figured out the issue on the sensing. Those are what are left of some light bulbs. And this one still works. That's why it can do the 45s. But those certainly cannot. So I need to replace these somehow. Yeah, I don't think that bulb was supposed to look like that. Well, that's the issue there. Gotta figure out what light bulbs to get. There we go. Yikes. Now the question is, are the photo detectors working as well? So that's why that works. That's definitely why the 45s work. So I gotta find some replacement lights for these guys. Somehow. What's the voltage of my light bulb? Because that circuit board was such a mess, I decided to completely remove it and give it a good cleanup. So here I am desoldering it to clean off the corrosion and everything from it. Let's see if we can't clean it off. Again, whatever they used to seal the light bulbs in, I think had eaten through the 2 leads on the bulbs you see missing here. The other one's still working, so I'm just going to leave it there. But I'm, going to carefully clean off the circuit board and at least get rid of some of the corrosion and old glue, I guess. So here I am just using a little bit of solder braid, cleaning it up the pads and trying to brainstorm my way into figuring out what I'm going to do to replace them. I also need to get some new solder braid because I think it's getting old and it's corroded a little bit, so it's not wicking the solder very well. But at least it's doing the job. So here's what I came up with. I have some mini 9-volt LED light bulbs that kind of fit in the circuit board, and I thought maybe I could modify things enough to make them work. So I thought, well, I'll widen the holes a little bit using a drill bit and make it so that the LED would sit nice and flush in the light bulb holes of the circuit board. And I used 2 different drill bit sizes, one to widen the hole all the way through and another one to create a little bit of countersink so that the ridge around the LED would fit nice and snug in place. The other issue, though, would be eventually wiring it up, because you'll notice I have wires that come off the LEDs, and each LED has a resistor in line with it so that you end up with the right current and voltage through and across the LED when it's functioning. So my solution won't be as elegant as the original wiring with the little tiny incandescent light bulbs, but I think once I get it cleaned up and I trim the LED lengths, I have to have a little bit of extra wire, but I have a lot of headroom above the circuit board in the system so that it doesn't come in contact with anything. Plus, it definitely makes it clear somebody's been here before, so you can see where I've modified it and put in LEDs, and since the old one worked, you can see what the original light would have looked like when it was installed. So after some amateurish soldering and putting the circuit back together and trying to figure out how I'm going to secure the wires in place, I had to test them to make sure they worked, and as you can see the flashes there, they actually all functioned. Then I had to reinstall that board back into where I removed it from the system earlier. There it is. Now I just need to see if all that work fixed the problem. So I have to now remove the play deck again, give myself enough space to reinstall that little circuit board up into the top railing and see if it actually triggers the photo detectors. So here I am unassembling again, moving the tone arm over so that I can pull the deck back without harming it. You see me checking the lights there to make sure they're actually turned on. And then you slide it out a little bit, and I'm going to reinstall the circuit board, and it fit pretty well. And you might worry again about those wires, but I take care of that a little bit later. I use a little bit of hot glue and get it out of the way. Hot glue time! I decided to use just a little bit of hot glue in hopes that it could kind of protect the circuit a little bit because it's kind of up at the top and exposed. And if there's any moisture that gets in there, that's going to be someplace it actually ends up. And while I was doing that, here are the lights that help with the speed detection. If you've seen the earlier video, they were the light I was playing with to see if it could see 33 or 45, and it could. And those lights worked. Well, at least one of them did. But since I was already there and one was out, I decided I was just going to replace them both. The LED trick seemed to work pretty well. And it turns out when I removed that little circuit board, the leads on the one light bulb that was working were barely hanging on as well. It had the same corrosion and glue issue that those other ones did. So I'm beginning to think maybe I should have gone ahead and changed that one light that worked, but it's working now, so I'm going to leave it. I did some of the same things to this as I did to the other. I used the mounting equipment and made the holes a little bit larger for the slightly larger LEDs. The little circuit board would have to be connected a little bit differently to the LEDs. The incandescent light bulbs were just wired in series, and so I had to modify exactly how the LEDs were connected on the little circuit board here. But it didn't take too much effort. It just had to get the right voltage and get a voltage across each one. So here I am just cleaning up the circuit board and trying to figure out how to get it going again. So I'm just experimenting a little bit, making sure I can get them illuminated and measuring correctly. And I probably did it backwards. I probably should have shortened the wires on the LEDs before doing all this, but I kind of did it backwards. So you see me here kind of struggling to get the wires the right length and connect it up correctly. But eventually I get there. And I think it actually ended up working pretty well. The little grooves on the side of the circuit board actually were able to hold some of the wiring. And rather than going up through the holes on it, I came around the sides and soldered it directly with the pads. Now, in the optimistic hopes that I had solved the problem, it was put it all back together. Replace the lights and put the record deck back together with all its pieces and parts and go through the testing phase to see if that was indeed all of the issues that I had discovered earlier. So here I am starting to test it. You can see up here at the top, those are the speed sensing lights that detect whether there's a 33 or 45 speed on the platter. They're on. And this is the functionality of the record player that already worked. With all those lights that were out, it would go over and set down and start playing 45. What did not work is when it would reach the end of a record, it would just sit there. It wouldn't know what to do. So by replacing one of the lights, when it got to the end, it suddenly said, I now know where the end of the record is, and I can go back and set the tone arm down. So 45s will start playing, and they will stop playing. So that's the first test. So the LEDs that I've used to replace that little circuit board with are functioning. Now here is the functionality of the record player portion of this system that did not work. When you would put a 33 on it, the tone arm wouldn't set down and it would just move to the center and not budge. So it had no idea what to do when this record was put on it. So now here you hit start, and now it says, oh, it's a 33, and here's where you set down to start playing the 33. So it's working. And it was even making a little bit of noise. So I was putting my ear next to it to make sure it was actually playing. And then here you again see me kind of fast forwarding to the end of the record so that I can make sure that it knows where the end is and will finish playing and move the tone arm back. And I think at this point I began to get pretty happy that all these changes were actually fixing the issue with the record player portion. Because here it goes. It's going to go set that tone arm back. And if you could have heard me at this point, I was whooping and hollering and going, woohoo! Maybe I can find a little bit of that in the video somewhere. It works. Yes! Yay! Replacing the lights worked. Of course, when I say it works, the record player now works. I still have to work on the tape player and figure out what's going on with the volume control and some internal system. But I'm getting there. So, state of affairs. Replace 2 of 3 lights here because 2 of them were corroded and not working at all. Third one was, so I just kind of left it. Changed them with LEDs because that's what I had, and it seems to be working. And thankfully, the one in the tone arm left is also working, so I didn't have to do that because that's a bear to replace. And even though it was working earlier, the speed sensing light over there, I had to change because one was blown out and then the other one went while I was messing around with these. So also changed that. So all the functions were not working because little lights are triggering everything. It's kind of interesting how it does it. There's a groove here, and if the light is going through that groove, it says 33. If it's going through that groove right here it says 45. And when it gets to this one, the last one, it says, oh, that's the end of the record and I need to go back. So all 3 lights here, end of record, 33, 45. They all have to be lit up over here while it works. And those, again, are the speed. Changed those because one of 2 was blown out and then the other one gave up the ghost. Now, it all works. Yeehaw! Hey, you're not part of this video. Come here. Oh, come here. Come here. Come here. Oh, okay. Put in here. Well, that escalated quickly. Anybody know how to fix a motor?